Alright, we're just checking in. How is the Tomari Supremacy Squad doing on this fine August day? Have you been enjoying the summer? Not too hot, not too cold. Hopefully you're fine. It's a bit of a long wait till we get more amazing Tomari action in October with the second season, but I'm sure we can hold out nice and strong as we have more cards to look at for her deck today, which is of course the DB202 Seraph Snow support. So welcome folks, today we're looking at the deck profile for Seraph Snow once again, this time around with the support of DB202. This is going to be the more control variant of the deck, not so much the beatdown version, where people play the new Orphist order and the 13k booster and stuff like that. This is very much just, we want to deplete our opponent's resources and not let them have anything, and that's basically the whole deck, right? So it's nothing too complicated, it's just a good time. So let's get into it and just talk about the deck as we always do. First things first, of course, we have the ride deck. It's the same culprits as usual. Nothing has changed in this aspect. So the starter that draws an extra card, the Kainai Blue that lets us search for the prison. No longer played in the rest of the main deck though, there's no space, but just there for prison search. And of course we have the Reset Pink, who lets us imprison a card from opponent's hand on turn 2. And then Seraph Snow is our main grade 3 that we'll talk about a bit later. So nothing too complex about the ride deck, I would say. It's pretty straightforward. And now of course we play one prison. So I'll zoom in here. Of course, the prison is the main, reason why you play this deck. I'm gonna start, I'm not gonna spend too much time talking about cards that we already talked about in the last deck profile, but you rest a unit to play it, and then when you play it, you soul charge 3, and when your opponent wants to call something out of the prison, they have to soul blast 1 to call 1 card, or count blast 1 to call 2 cards. As always, it's the same thing, nothing too crazy. You want to have it on turn 1 at all times. And then of course our remaining 3 copies of Seraph Snow. I have not picked up the other 2 SPs for the time being, I just have 2, just because one of the guys in my locals pulled one. But I'm kind of holding off for the DSRs, so I'm just going to kind of wait. Of course, Seraph Snow says, if you have 1 or more opponent's cards imprisoned in your prison, gets plus 10k power, and if you have 3 or more, get an extra drive, which is really easy to achieve in this set. You generally get to 3, 4, 5 cards in prison very smoothly against basically anything at this point. She also lets you count plus 1 once per turn on Vanguard rearguard circle to imprison 2 of your opponent's rearguards, which is pretty nice. You don't even use that skill that often anymore, just because you have other ways to imprison stuff pretty consistently. So it's only when they really have pesky stuff that you want to get rid of that you put that skill down. But otherwise, it's a good card. We run it as a 3 of for Persona Ride purposes, and of course, it's just a good card overall. Getting into the grade 2s, we'll start with something that's a bit older. Of course, this is going to be the Aggro Rouge. So Aggro Rouge is pretty straightforward. Gains plus 5k power and 10k shield when you have 2 or more of your opponent's cards imprisoned in your prison, which is again very easy now. So she'll be a 15k interceptor / shield, not against everything, but against quite a lot of matchups. But she will be a 15k attacker very consistently, that's for sure. And also when she is called, you can soul blast 1 to imprison the opponent's front row rear guard. So it's another imprison. This time it's just soul blast 1, don't even have to counter blast, which is also great. We want to run her as a 4 of, and that is not going to change for the time being. Now the new grade 2, or one of the new grade 2s, is of course the Perio Turquoise, who's probably the face of the thumbnail here as well. Keep in mind she has a misprint on her triple rare rarity where she has 10k shield, but bear in mind she still has 5k shield, don't play her wrong. So the cool thing about this card is that she says, well, her second skill is when she's on the front row rearguard circle, when your opponent's imprisoned card, is put on the rearguard circle, you can give it minus 5k power. So that is really nice, where basically we imprison all of our opponent's stuff, and then we basically tell them, it's like, oh, you want it back? Well, it's going to be nerfed, right? It's literally going to be worse than what you normally would have it at if you called it from hand. And so having 2 of them on the field makes for a lot of pressure. Of course, some decks can get around her pretty easily, but for the most part, she is really cool pressure against the opponent. You can even have her down as early as turn 2. They give you something from their hand, with the Reset Pink, and then you just tell them okay, you want it back? Well, it's gonna be less powerful than you would think. She also gets plus 5k when you have 2 or more imprisoned units, so she's also a consistent 15k attacker, which we always really like. And then we have 2 of the Perio Violet. You can play more or less of this depending on your local meta. If you have Bruce players in your local meta, then you might want to put this up to 3 or 4 even. But if your local is just Bastion and nothing else, this card will do absolutely nothing, because her skill is when she's put on Guardian Circle, which means you can also intercept with her to activate that skill. If you have 1 or more cards in your prison, soul blast 1, choose an opponent's unit, and if it's a grade 2 or lower, that attack doesn't hit. So you choose one of your units that is not, and basically she perfect guards against the grade 2s. So against stuff like Leonard, against stuff like Eden, just annoying grade 2s in general. Also, even against Orphist, tokens can be chosen for that reason as well, because they are grade 1. So overall, just fantastic, and she is a good card, just to deal with Bruce in general, but against Bastion, she is very much a dead card. And those are the 2 most popular decks in the meta right now. I think Nirvana is also pretty popular, so it does a good job against that as well. Then I am playing 4 copies of of the 24-hour coverage order. So this one is a Soulbox one to play. It's a normal order. It's grade 2. Soulbox one to play it. If your opponent has 4 more cards in hand, then they have to choose one from their hand and imprison it. And then if you have 3 or more cards in your prison, you give a unit plus 5k power. So it doubles up as a power up as well as a hand in prison, which is really, really cool because especially in the late game when your opponents think that they're safe, you know, or they have like a 5-6 card hand, then you just like rip something out. That can be exactly what it takes to win the whole game. So this card is always going to be a threat. You don't need too many of it in hand at one point, so I often discard it for the right deck, but at the same time, it can be so punishing to some players, you know, just like lose that, especially combined with Perio Turquoise, that this card in my opinion is really, really good. You can decrease it to 3 or even 2 depending on the build you're playing, but I think in this more like heavy control variant of the deck, you definitely want to be playing a lot of copies of this card. You know, it's just a good order, and overall just very, very nice. Now the card that basically fixed all of this deck's problems in my opinion is the Bago Motor. So Bago Motor is a fantastic card. It says act if you have 1 or less cards in your prison, rest it to choose an opponent's card from their drop zone and imprison it. So this is amazing because you can basically, you know, on turn 2, you know, Perio Violet, sorry, not Perio Violet, the resets pink, imprisons from hand, and then you rest this, imprison something from drop, and then, I don't know, if they have something on the field, you imprison that, bam, 3 cards in the prison, or you can just like, you know, have the 2 for example, the 15k attackers and stuff like that. You can do early rushing. Of course, you're a control deck, so you don't really need to worry about that. You want to play the long game more so than anything, but you always want to target your opponent's triggers with this because your opponent generally doesn't want to call triggers back to their field, and so of course this will be a lot more punishing if you take out their triggers from their drop zone. So Bago Motor is an amazing card. You want to see it at all times. Opening it is great because then, especially if you're going second, you can call it down. You know, let's say if you need to, you can rest it for the prison, but normally if you go first, for example, you want to rest your Vanguard. But also, like, you can take your opponent's right deck discards for this. Keep in mind, it can't take orders though. You can only take unit cards, can't take any card. So you can't imprison orders, but you can imprison triggers and grade 0s and just like cards in general that your opponent doesn't want on the field. So it's a really good card. I can't really say that enough. It is a fantastic card that really, really does help the deck and patch up a lot of its weaknesses. This card became a lot better as a result of it being easier to imprison your opponent's stuff, which is the Cheval Stud. So he is a once per turn, Calmas 1, Soulbox 1, choose an opponent's rear guard and imprison it. And if you have 3 more cards in your prison, draw a card. So Calmas 1, Soulbox 1, imprison something, and then draw. That draw is now basically certain every single time. Like, it is a very, very safe draw. You usually always get it. And so it's just a fantastic card. Like, honestly, this has only gotten better over time. And I had a feeling it would because, you know, the easier it gets to imprison, the better that card will be, right? And then, of course, 4 PGs, nothing surprising here. You'll also notice that I don't, like, I have, like, some cards maxed, and then some cards I've been lazy to pick up SPs of, or, like, my PGs are hollow, but you're gonna get pretty sad when you see my triggers, right? Because my over trigger, yeah, it's, I didn't buy 2 SPs. So the Brandt Gate over trigger, of course, is pretty amazing. You can potentially FTK people with this, you know, if things go really, really well. But of course, it's the additional effect to double the power and critical volt front row units until end of turn, so it's very explosive. And of course, 100 million power, etc, etc. As usual, good over trigger stuff. Don't really need to go over it now anymore. Let me zoom out a little bit for the rest of the triggers. You can look at Gabriel for the time being. I'm very excited for V Premium right now, actually. Alright, so we got 4 of these crits, and then here you notice that I've been too lazy to even buy spare foils. We got 8 crit here, and then of course we also play 4 heals, and so yeah, I have 1 SP and 3 triples again. Don't really care about maxing this deck as much as I care about it in Orfist, so this is the pretty, like, you know, typical lineup, let's say, of these triggers. But the new addition, of course, is the brand new fronts, which we do play 3 of. Again, for a more control deck, it's nice to have defensive options. So this is a 20k shield when your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or higher. So for that reason, it is pretty good, and we do like that a lot. So that is a deck list. Now let's take a look at some mulligans, right deck discards, and it's not real optimal boards or like combos and stuff to learn, but I guess we can still show that. All right, for the right deck discards, I think this one is by far the biggest one. When you have too many of the 24-hour coverage in your hand, like 3 or even 2 sometimes, like there are very specific instances where you want to use this, you can definitely drop it. Like, you can definitely just like drop it for right deck and not worry about it too much. Then depending on the matchup, Perio Violet might just be a dead card in hand, so definitely keep in mind like what you're playing against. If it's something like Bastion, just get rid of it. You don't need it, you're not going to be using it. It's just a 10k beater otherwise, and that's it. There is such a thing as too many Bago Motors. If you have like 2 or 3, you just don't really need that many. Like 2 at most, I would say, is necessary, unless you're playing in something like super control-y or like Prison itself, I guess. But even then, in a mirror match, you can get them back. It's not really a unit you attack with or anything, so getting it back even under the -5k buff is still pretty good. So, but you don't need too many, so of course keep that in mind. And this is another card you don't need too many of, Cheval Stud. You'll just run out of Counterblast and Soul Blast. And yes, we don't run Bubble Mine in this deck because we don't Counterblast as much compared to something like Orphis, and we're not that reliant on Counterblast. The only cards that do Counterblast in this deck is this card and Seraph Snow herself. Literally the only cards that Counterblast, unless I'm forgetting something. But I'm pretty sure everything else is literally just like Soul Blast or like some other way to pay cost, right? Or like Rest. So yeah, we don't need Counter Chargers, but Cheval Stud, it's a good card, but you don't need too many either. And those are basically the right deck discards. You can also discard triggers if things get really bad, or not even that bad, but if you know, just don't have anything else to discard. But now let's take a quick look at the optimal boards. In terms of optimal boards, I would say it's nothing too complicated. Like having multiple Perio Turquoises means that you're just giving your opponent more pressure on like de-imprisoning stuff, which is of course really, really big. And this can also be switched out like this for an Aggro Rouge, because then you have like a really nice intercept and you force your opponent to want to, you know, unimprison stuff, because that way this isn't as big of an intercept. Bago Motor will be rested in early game, but later on, once your prison is big enough, you just kind of keep him standing, and he's a good AK boost to make your 23k columns. And of course, Cheval Stud is a good little source of card draw and stuff like that. There's no combos in this deck or anything. It's a control deck, so there's no like big plays to be shown off, but these are the kind of boards that you want to be aiming for to have consistent 23k attackers across the board. All right, so let's get into the little Mulligan demonstration. I guess Mulligan plus a little bit of gameplay. Nothing too complicated. Like generally speaking, you just kind of read the room and see what your hand allows you to do, and that's about it. The deck is not too complicated to like execute. It's more so complicated in knowing how to deny the things that your opponent wants to do and stuff like that, right? So let's see what our opening hand is going to look like. Oh, this is looking really good so far. I actually quite like this. We put back the heal trigger, of course, but apart from that, the Cheval Stud is going to be handy surprisingly early, I think, so I kind of want to keep that. PG is also okay. I guess depending on the matchup, we might not need to keep it. Of course, we redraw into a heal and another Cheval Stud, so I guess we'll take that. So let's just give it a quick Mulligan shuffle, and then we'll get into it. All right, there we go. It should be shuffled enough. Let's take a look at how the deck works now with the second set. So we draw, of course, as usual. Let's do our, you know, who goes first, who goes second thing. So I guess this time Novas will be me and Angels will be the opponent. And looks like it's the same. All right, once again. Looks like we'll be going first. Okay, well, that's really good. You love going first with this deck because of the whole prison mechanic. We have way too many Cheval Studs in hand, so let's discard one for the right deck and go into Kainai Blue. Kainai Blue's ability will help us search for a prison, which is pretty handy, but if we can find it, of course, that's the biggest question. Is it at the top of the deck? Yes, it is. All right, so give it a quick shuffle. I don't know why, it always feels really warm whenever I record a deck riff all these days. I guess it has been the summer for quite a few months now. Alright, so since we went first, we can just basically, you know, use the order here and play this out, you know, play in the order zone, and then Soul Charge 3. So we're going to get a PG, order, and a Reset Pink, not Reset Pink, the Perio Violet, that's her name. So yeah, that's going to be it for the turn. So we're going to just pass along to our opponent, take a damage, as we usually do, and then just going to go back to our turn here so we can start pushing things. So here, we have both a lot of the Bago Motor as well as the Cheval Stud. I kind of like the idea of discarding one of the Bago Motors just because we don't need too many, I guess. So Reset Pink will get a card in the prison, which is definitely very nice. And then we can call this out to already pressure a little bit. Or if you don't want to pressure as much, you can just call out the Bago Motor, rest it to take something that they discarded for the right deck, and you have a 2-card prison already. Don't want to push too much damage because then you give them too much counterblast or like, you know, opportunities to free their cards. So don't push too much at the start. And just like that, we're going to have double Perio Turquoise, which is really cool. All right, so let's take a damage. We get a front, which is nice. That should normally shut down our opponent's turn. Especially when we went first, that was their grade 2 turn. Here, we're going to discard one of the Cheval Studs to just ride, assuming that they freed some stuff from the prison at this point. So we're going to rest this first to imprison something. And then let's just say we use, like, I don't know, Seraph Snow's effect to imprison something. And then we can do the, you know, keep in mind, we're going first here, right? So their opponent's on grade 2 still. So we can do something like this, and then use the Cheval Stud to, let's say, imprison the last thing on the board. So Counterblast 1, Soulbox 1. We imprison the last thing. We have more than enough cards in the drop, or in the prison, so we get to draw an extra card. And now we have triple drive. So I'm going to hold off on the order for now. We want to keep that for late game if we don't order, you know, draw more. So we swing with 23 here. We get a nothing, and a nothing, but that's Persona Ride, so I guess that's not too bad. Then you basically just bash with 15, and then this will be 23, and now we are giving our opponent the pressure that if they free anything, it'll get -10. And you just kind of go back and forth like that, obviously keeping your order for the turns where it really matters, you know, where you have that big pressure unless you have multiples in hand. This is, of course, a meaty shield, and at the same time also an imprison, so you can use it for that reason. And this is, of course, also pretty cool. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of how the deck is played and the kind of mulligan you want to go for. This is definitely like an early game piece you want to be having at all times, and this kind of setup is just like really, really clean. And that's going to do it for this updated Seraph Snow deck profile. Hope you guys enjoyed it and learned a thing or two. I think the control variant definitely feels very good, especially if you like control type decks from other card games. This is definitely going to be the closest it's been in Vanguard as well. It's a fun little deck, lots of little things to think about, and not too much on the combo heavy side, but more so fun to just like deny your opponent's plays and just be very annoying as control decks want to be. As always, if you want to pick up any of these cards or upcoming premium collection or V clan collection cards, you can go to parkage.com and use discount code DifferentFight for a 5% discount at checkout. I also do live stream on Twitch. We do some playtesting for Vanguard as well, so you can check that out on twitch.tv/differentfight. But otherwise, that's going to be it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.